Hello, welcome to the Midlife Freedom Podcast. This is Lindsay and I'm your host. How are you? So today I am really fortunate to have Lori Pappas with me as my guest. And she's the author of this book, if you can see on video. And if you're just listening, then the book is called The Magic of Yes. Fantastic book, really inspirational. Anyway, you're going to hear more about it in the show. So I would love for us just to jump on in, go and listen to the interview, and Laurie's just an absolute gem. Okay, hope you enjoy the show. Hello. Hey, Lori, how are you?
I am terrific. How are you, Lindsay?
I'm really well. I'm so delighted that we've managed to organise this conversation today because I've been looking forward to it.
Oh, I am so pleased. Even though it's really early here in California, I still had a chance to take my dog for a walk, and so life is good.
Lori, what I would love to do today is to talk about your fantastic inspirational story, but we can't squash it all into like a 40-minute chat.
Right.
So introduce yourself a little, and then I'm going to dig into the bits that I've found really interesting and really enjoyed, and especially because with reading your book, here we are, here's Laurie's book. Through reading your book, I've got some more details. So,
okay.
What would you love the audience to know about you first?
Well, I think what I'd love to have them know about me first is that I am 75 years old. I'm almost 76, and I'm in the highest learning, most motivating time of my life.
Oh!
Yeah. And I think that's a bit different because people think, oh no, I'm going into retirement. What am I going to do? Well, if you're like me, you fail retirement. And you keep reinventing yourself and doing other things. So I think that's the number one message is that it's the 70s, I think, for me right now. It's the best decade of my life.
Oh, wow. That's so refreshing to hear.
Yeah. So,
really cool. Now, if we can wind it back a little bit, you saying that, I love you saying that, because there was a book that I read a long time ago, I don't know, probably 9 years ago now, and it was called The 100-Year Life. And The 100-Year Life, have you read it by any chance?
No, I haven't, but it sounds great.
Yeah, it's really good because what it talks about is how you make investments of different types in your life. So not only financial investment, but social, for your family, for building community, or for re-educating yourself and reinventing yourself. And your life and your life story, to me, is the absolute perfect example of that, because you keep facing yet another challenge and then reinventing it and then learning the lessons and then taking that on to the next thing. I mean, you're an adventurer by kind of necessity, but then how career focused you are and what success you found there.
Sure. Well, to dial it back a little bit further, as the book says, I had a traumatic childhood and I had to take charge of my life. And so I took responsibility of being that curious entrepreneur in my life. And I thought, wow, this is just instead of thinking, oh, poor me, to me it was like, oh, wow, I get a chance to put together these building blocks. I get to figure out what I want to be and who I want to be. And I have always been an overachiever and had a lot of drive. I have a lot of energy and I'm really curious. I also really hate detail. I do.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
I do. And in my generation, like I said, I'm 75. So back in the 50s, early 60s, women had like 4 choices. It was get married, have kids. That's what you're really supposed to do. And that was really the overarching choice.
Yeah.
If you needed to work, you could be a nurse or a teacher. And if you didn't choose those, then you're in the office. Well, I wasn't a nurse, I wasn't a teacher, so I ended up in the office and I was stuck with this detail. And so every place I worked, I ended up automating whatever was available to use at the time because I don't like detail, but I want detail handled.
Right, yeah.
So that's what got me into the computer industry. And so that's how I became one of the first women I think probably in the world, I know in the United States, to sell computer systems. And that was in the early 70s. Well, and I did really well because I was an oddity. You know, I had an easy time getting appointments because the men wanted to see what this broad looked like. I mean, it wasn't that, oh, I was, you know, they really wanted to hear about my product. They just wanted to lighten up their day.
Yeah.
And I learned how to capitalize on that. You know, I could walk in and I could smile, and I was blessed with being marvelously adequate looking. I wasn't beautiful, but I wasn't ugly. So, you know, you're really kind of in that sweet spot where you're okay.
Yeah, you're safe.
But yeah, you're a little bit more safe. And I learned how to lead them on to the point of them signing my order. But I had very strict boundaries with them. And because I had survived the trauma of my childhood, I had very thick skin.
Yeah.
So as they would throw barbs at me, I could deflect them because I had already been, you know, put through the grinder, and I had developed that outer shell of that thick skin. And that's how I discovered the manufacturing industry, and I was lucky. I was really lucky because it was right at the advent of the personal computer, the microcomputer, they were called at the time. And so now all of a sudden, small businesses could afford them.
Right.
So, and small manufacturers, small business, right place, right time. I knew how to organize detail. And I was lucky. And I grew the business. I didn't have any money, so I had to figure out how to sell without traveling all over the place. And so we were a pioneer in telesales and in webinars. And I sold the business at 49. So I was at the right place at the right time.
Oh, so inspiring. I mean, you say that, and you say that you were lucky and right place, right time. But you'd had a background in working your way through computer sales by then. How long had you been in computer sales as one of the very few women?
I think that I actually was in computer sales for about 4 years.
Okay.
And and I was a single mom too.
Of two.
My little girls were 4 and 6. And I guess when I started Job Boss, I actually was pregnant with my third.
Yeah.
But I wasn't married again. I'd had this great fling, and I ended up pregnant, and he disappeared. So when I started Job Boss, in fact, I remember when I rented my first office space, it was 2 days before he was born. And I had to get the name. Yes. And I forgot about this story. I had found office equipment in a warehouse for some reason. And I remember I couldn't fit behind the steering wheel of the rental truck. So I had to ask the neighbor boy, who was just 16, to drive this U-Haul. And I remember trying to climb up on the loading dock of that warehouse to look at this office furniture that I was buying. Anyway, I got it, we delivered it, and then I delivered my baby. So there we go.
Oh my goodness.
I forgot about that story.
That's so funny. So funny. I have a real thing with people saying that women are great at multitasking. It's just going, no, we shouldn't be at the stage whereby we have to do multitasking. But you've just given me a perfect example of how the heck do you do that? That's the ultimate in multitasking, but that's only by necessity, right?
Well, you know what? I think our brains are we're the lucky ones the way our brains are wired. We really are. And I can remember seeing this picture of the male brain and the female brain. And looking at this picture, the female brain looked like this spider web going across the two left and the right channels. And the male brain had this rope bridge going across. And yes, when it came to business at that time, men were considered so much better because they could have these little compartment drawers. And as they went across the rope bridge, they could put some task in a compartment. Where women, with this spider web, we sometimes got mixed up with getting so much done all at the same time. But it really is an advantage because That's why we can talk on the phone and have the kids yelling and screaming, and we stop them from killing each other, and we've got dinner going, and we've got all these different things because we can multitask.
Yeah.
So we just have to learn to utilize that to our advantage, because it's a great advantage.
It is a great
huge advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also wish it wasn't a necessity, because I think that's, for me, that's the conflict. As in, because you've got that ability, it's a shame that we have to use that because we have so many expectations on us. When we have the choice to use it, fantastic. It's a brilliant tool almost that we have, a quality, shall we say. It's a brilliant quality that we have about us. But it's just a shame that invariably people will say, oh, you're good at multitasking, and just dump everything on you.
Well, that's where you have to say no.
Yeah, exactly. That's where boundaries come in.
That's where boundaries come in. Say, I was going to swear, but say no. It's and that's really where boundaries come in.
Yeah, only because you can doesn't mean
no.
You should. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, so way more important things in your story, for heaven's sakes. Okay, so you've had your children, you've then sold the business. How old was your youngest one when you sold the business?
He was 18. No, he was probably 16, something like that. My girls were in their 20s, and my business was in Minnesota, and so they stayed there, and they had their careers and so forth. And my son that was my second husband at the time, moved out to Washington State. And so David went to 10th, 11th, and 12th grade out there.
Right. Okay. And then, so how soon after that did you then start your next project?
I started Global Team for Local Initiatives when I was 57. So it was basically 7 years later. It took me, because I tried really hard to retire. I mean, I planted 3,000 different kinds of plants in my garden. I tried to play golf, which was a disaster. I did volunteer work, hoping I could be a follower, and found that I failed at that because I do better as a leader. And then we traveled a lot. And that's when I had my epiphany in Niger, when a little girl came up to me with flies on her eyes. And I thought, that could be my little Ella, my little granddaughter.
Yeah.
And Ella did nothing special to be my granddaughter, and this little girl did nothing wrong to be born into this disease-ridden life. So that's where my second life purpose came, which was to help disadvantaged people have a chance for a healthy life.
So tell us all about that.
About doing that?
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
That transition. Okay. Well, so here I am thinking, well, I'm a successful entrepreneur. I know how to start a business and run a business. This will be easy. I can do this. Well, I did it in the States, my for-profit business.
Right.
A place where we have equal opportunity employment laws. We've got all this governance system in place. And I chose, of course, the hardest place in the world to do this, which was the southwest corner of Ethiopia, where you've got a very difficult government that is trying to look democratic but is not democratic, and that is very, very fear-based. And you have employment laws that say if an employee is hired, they're your employee. Well, I'm used to hiring and firing based on merit. So anyway, it was quite a process. And but I fell in love with my beneficiaries, and they were from indigenous tribes in southwest Ethiopia. And I was in awe of the strength and the innate wisdom of these people. Here they have none of the tools that we have. They didn't know anything about internet. They don't know anything about, they didn't drive cars. The women walked 50 miles to get their sorghum to bring back. They ground their soybeans by hand on grinding wheels. The men actually make their own hatchets with grinding the stones, and it's an entirely different environment. So looking as an outsider in, it's easy to say, oh my goodness, these people are so primitive. But as you get to know them, it's like, oh my God, these people are so amazing because they have been able to survive generations after generation, century after century, and they're very collaborative. And they're very caring. And yes, they've got very harmful traditional practices, but there's a reason behind those traditional practices.
Yeah.
So this was just such a eye-opening, wonderful experience for me.
I love one of the stories you told in your book about how they resolved, was it a conflict, or you'd fallen out with somebody, or you made a mistake, and
Right.
how they managed to resolve that. That was a beautiful story.
Yeah, it's so what it was that I started working in that area, gaining trust. This was while I was trying to raise money to do big initiatives, by giving away free medicine, over-the-counter medicine that helps clear up intestinal worms. And I would bring a duffel bag full of medicine down to the field when we went down there. And one day when we got there, it was raining, and we hurriedly took all of our duffel bags and tents and that and put them on a tarp. And then my driver and I set up camp. And when we looked around, we couldn't find the duffel bag of medicine. And a little boy, a little orphan, came up and he says, oh, I saw this guy, Kole, take your bag. And he told the elders that. The elders brought Kole in front of them and started doing their research, which meant that Marmaru, the shaman of the area, started flipping his sandals. They squatted in a circle, and by this sandal flipping process, they could determine what was true and what wasn't. And by this time, Bayou, my driver, and I had done our thing, and we had gone back up to Addis, and we found the duffel bag at the house. Bayou's English wasn't great, and my Amharic was a lot worse than his English. And we had just gotten our wires crossed, and we had failed to bring the medicine bag. So here down in the field, Kole is being incarcerated and accused of stealing. And all of a sudden I find out it's my mistake. And we asked for advice from a government official, and he said, well, wait until you can get down there and resolve it, Lori. So it was about 3-4 months, and I finally got down there, and the first thing I did was said, hey, this is my fault. I made a mistake. And it turned out they had only kept Kole for 5 days because the sandals had said they didn't provide the evidence saying that Kole was guilty. So they gathered us all in the sandy riverbed, me and the elders, and they started talking and talking and talking. And they decided that, yes, I made a mistake, but I was a human being, and human beings make a mistake. So they had Kole and I hold hands and take 4 steps to the west, and everything was resolved. And it is amazing. And I gave Kole money for some goats because he had lost goats at the time when he was incarcerated. And several years later, Kole became one of our best community teachers.
No way, really?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But that's how it was. It was like, well, yes, you made a mistake. You're wrong. You're human. We forgive you. We drop the baggage and we move on.
Such wisdom.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved that story. So, I haven't got to the end of the book yet. So, What happened next?
Well, you got to read it. You got to read it.
But come on, I can't do that to you.
Okay, well, really what ended up happening is that we did a lot of initiatives. I mean, wells and water sanitation behavior change and reproductive health and environment and an orphanage and all kinds of things. But by 2016, the country was imploding a bit with conflict. And it was no longer safe for me to live there, and it was no longer safe for us to send people and services and product from Addis Ababa, the capital, down to the field. Right. And one of our contract workers was killed. I mean, I had to leave, and I had to shut it down. So I left.
Yeah.
And that was very, very difficult
I
to
bet.
do.
How long were you there?
10 years.
Yeah, that's
I
a
was
big
there
chunk.
10 years. Yeah. Yeah. And by then, I mean, the people really depended on what we were doing, and we were making tremendous progress. And the worst part of it is I had to leave without saying goodbye. So, my granddaughter and I are going back there in November, and I'm going to take her down there, and I'm going to be able to see my friends again.
Oh,
Yeah, it'll be
that's so
great.
cool. So at what stage did you decide to write a book about it all? Because
Well,
that's a whole nother project in itself, isn't it?
it is. It is. So during that time living in Ethiopia, I was, a lot of my time was spent up in Addis Ababa, the capital, because that's where some of my employees were based. And I was dealing with the government and the donors. And it was exhausting. I mean, all day long, you're trying to communicate. And you're trying to figure out why things just are not logical. And remember, I'm one of these computer people, very logical, and stuff just wasn't computing for me, and so it would be exhausting, and I was being harassed and so forth. Every night, by the time I got to my little house, which, by the way, was a very leaky affair. I mean, there were big gaps in the windows and under the doors, and so all the wind would come whistling through. It would get cold at night, and I would bundle up with everything that I had and sit there. But then the electricity wouldn't work.
Right.
And all I had was the light of my 3 candles. So sitting there, tired, in the dark, with a little bit of a flicker of the light, I was forced to think. And I no longer could do, because it was dark. There was no doing available. So I was forced to think. And I started asking myself, well, what if people really collaborated instead of competed? What if we took time to really think about the needs of the person we're talking to versus expressing what our needs are? What if we really became seekers to understand versus seekers to be understood? And then I started thinking, well, Lori, what if you stopped just doing and you started being? If you put as much attention into reflection and understanding peace within as you are with helping other people, what if you said yes to that? And then that's how it all came out to be, the magic of yes. By saying, yes, I'm willing to embrace that wise woman within me and explore and try to find those kernels of wisdom in me. And I'm going to work now on being, and then sharing that being with others.
And how did that change you?
Oh, dramatically. First of all, it took me 7 years to recover from Ethiopia.
Really?
It took me 7 years because I gave everything.
Yeah.
You know, I emptied myself. And I realized that by emptying myself, that really is a disservice. That it really is a disservice. Because you're really just not allowing yourself to have that energy to really be yourself.
Yeah.
And so once I was able to recover, then I knew I had to write this book, and I didn't want to write it because I never had an advocate. Writing was not something I ever really wanted to do.
Right.
And, but it was my big supposed to. I knew I had to write the book, that too much had been invested in me to not share it with others. And that was one thing I really needed to do. And I didn't really know how it would turn out. You know, it started out being a bit more of a story of my life. And I didn't like that because I get tired of talking about me. And I really wanted to share what I learned in a way that people could relate to it. And I kept thinking, well, you know, not a lot of people are going to escape to Africa to get rid of a crappy marriage. You know, I mean, that's a little bit.
It does seem quite extreme, I've got to be honest.
It does, yeah. So then I thought, well, you know, there's so many extraordinary, ordinary women in the world. Why don't I include a story about one of them in every chapter that's maybe a little bit more relatable. And then even after the book was sent to the publisher, I had a little bit more time and I thought, well, I really want to make sure that if somebody is going to take the time to read my book, that they have an action plan that they can think about. If they want to win with the cards they were dealt, well, what are the steps they could go through to be able to do that? Or if they wanted to forgive themselves and forgive others, what are the steps and how could you do that? And so that's why I came up with that dream framework.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and I do too. I think that's what's made the book. It
ties it all together so beautifully, and it's just that theme that runs through each chapter.
Yeah,
yeah.
I know. It was a product of a morning walk with the dog.
There you go. The universe is guiding.
Absolutely. And it was like, well, what is if you want to, let's take that win with the cards that you dealt. If you want to win with that, what is it that you're really saying you want to be? What's your desire? Well, it's to be the best version of you, right? Because if you want to win, you generally want to be the best.
Yeah.
And so then what do I need to reflect about? And what kind of things should I explore? And then this one I really think is important is what do I need to acknowledge? Well, one of the things we have to acknowledge is sometimes life really sucks. Yeah. I mean, it really does. And sometimes you're dealt a really crappy hand. And that's the way it is. So now you've got a choice. Do you want to say, oh, poor me? Or do you want to say, oh, well, I survived that. Look at me. I'm resilient. I've got muscle. I can do this. Let's go. And then I think mantras are really important because I think it's really important to have something that soothes your soul. The kind of that self-talk that will help you feel more at peace with what it is that you're trying to achieve. And I know lately here, as you may have heard in the UK, we have some challenges here in the States these days.
I've heard some rumors, yes.
You've heard some rumors that there's some disruption going on.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I can't fix that. But what I can do is I can encourage people to find their own inner peace and how they can soothe their soul during this time of disruption. And to really understand the fact that we all get to choose what it is we read. We get to choose how we fill our mind. What do we bring in? We get to choose who do we surround ourselves with. Because we really are the masters of ourselves.
Absolutely. And it happens in every country, in all stages of life, male, female, married, single. That's the one thing that we all have in common. And I think people undervalue themselves, forgetting of how much choice, or put it this way, not how much choice, but how important that choice is.
And I think you were right in the beginning, too, is that every single human being does have an innate power of choice. We do. Because how many times have you heard somebody say, oh, well, I didn't have any choice? Well, bullshit. I mean, you do have a choice. Maybe you can't change the situation, but you can choose how you react to the situation.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Your behavior is your choice. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. So out of all of the things that you've achieved, and it's a lot by anybody's standards, what is the thing you're most proud of?
What I'm most proud of is that at 75, I am. That this transition from a doer to a beer, I mean, really, to be honest, Lindsay, I really haven't aced this yet because now what am I really doing? I'm trying to get my message out. So I'm still doing, and because I want to share and I want to have a positive impact on other people. But I really am proud of myself that, for example, right before we connected on this podcast and I was walking Mooney, my wonderful Australian cattle dog, and I was looking at the trees, and instead of having my mind being busy about what we were going to say, I was actually looking at the trees and saying, may I meet this moment fully. May I meet this moment with ease. And that is huge for me. That is so different than how I was 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago. Because then I would have been looking, I would have had trees in front of me, but I wouldn't have been looking at them and marveling at that sunlight coming through. And having my mind think about, I just want to take this moment in fully. And I really want to be present right now.
That's so profound. I love that. Because, as you say, the trees are there, but how much do you appreciate them? How much are you nurtured by them? How much are you grateful for being in that moment? Because those moments are so easy to miss.
And they are so profound.
Yeah.
The thing that really kept me centered when I was over in Ethiopia, and there was a lot of strife. I mean, it was not an easy thing at all. It was difficult.
Yeah.
Especially the bed bugs. I got bed bugs too, but we don't have to go into that.
Too late, you just did.
But anyway, I had a couple crystals, but I had a couple of rocks, and I had this one rock that was just like palm size, and it was smooth on both sides. And every night I would go to bed holding that rock.
Oh, really?
And as I was laying in bed, and I had a mantra that I would say laying in bed to calm my mind. And I so much wanted to be an endless source of peace, love, and harmony. And I'll tell you what, one of the hardest things I've ever done, and I haven't aced this yet either, but is transitioning from being a fierce competitor that came out top in a man's world to being a source of peace, love, and harmony. That is a bit different, kind of opposite sides.
Yeah.
But I want that. I really want to be a source of that. And so I'd lay in bed holding my rock and just say that to myself over and over. And something as simple as holding a rock can really nurture you.
It's very grounding.
You're really grounding, absolutely. Just like walking and looking at the trees, and really looking at the trees and intentionally saying, I want to be in this moment.
Yeah. Feeling the sun on your face, feeling the grass under your feet.
Right.
It's just about being in the moment, isn't it?
It is. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, an essential part for me, my essential part of my morning routine is to get outside barefoot on the grass, no matter how cold, and to listen to the wind in the trees and feel the sun on my face. And
wow. I mean, you really do that? You really in England?
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
Really do that?
Every single day.
Wow.
And you know what? I can be out there for half an hour. I can be out there for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter because it's not the time. The time is just like loosey-goosey bendy at that time because you're so in the moment. It's like a meditation.
Yeah.
But just like you holding the rock, it can be...
Right.
It's one of those things that's so easy to not do.
It is. And it's also easy to do.
Exactly. It really is. It totally is. So living between the different cultures, that's another question I had for you. How did you find that initially, and the person you came out at the end of it as, it's got to be a different person than you went in as.
Right. Well, I went in as somebody that was still struggling to feel. And when I remember one of the early days that I was over in Ethiopia, lying alone in my bed and realizing, oh my goodness, I'm no longer in the States. I'm not governed by those cultural constraints. Mm. I'm not an Ethiopian. I'm not governed by those cultural constraints. Therefore, I'm free. I'm free. I'm free to be me. And I can decide how I want to be. And that's when I started feeling unfettered and free.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, and literally, it was like, wow, I am free to be me.
Amazing. And so then when you came back to the US afterwards, were you still able to apply that sort of that mindset and that way of being?
Well, first of all, when I came back to the US and to Mexico, I was terrified because my daughter had talked me into online dating, and I had no desire to get mixed up with anybody. I mean, I had 2 failed marriages. I was finally unfettered and free. Why would I want to screw up my life? But I was curious. So I did for a couple months. And I wasn't getting very many hits because I was basically saying on that profile, okay, listen, this is how it's going to be. Da-da-da-da-da-da, and I'm willing to meet up once a quarter in some great place, have a wonderful weekend, and then just so you know, you go back to where you came from, and I'm going back to my life, and don't mess with me, bud. I'll see you in 3 months.
Right,
you know?
and
how
was that received?
Not very good.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it really didn't go over very well. Plus, my profile picture was with me in my field clothes, and I had all these little black babies that I was holding, and I'm very white, and I had indigenous people kissing me on the cheek, and they've got mud in their hair, and this and that, and
I think
and
that might have been a bit of unconscious sabotage.
Well, yeah, but what I really was trying to do was to try to make sure that I was not going to compromise me, because that's what really mattered to me. I'm very liberal because I really believe everybody should have a chance, and that's really who I am. I was terrified that I would compromise what I had struggled so hard to become.
Yeah.
And so after a few months, I had changed a little bit of the wording on my profile, and I didn't look quite as bizarre, but I didn't change my pictures. And I thought, to hell with it. And I'd gone back to Minnesota for a couple weeks of leave, and my granddaughter was over, and by that time she was, I don't know, maybe about 16, and we were bored, and so my daughter said, well, why don't you and Ella go look and see if you can find her grandpa? And I thought, oh, all right. Yeah. Well, and this guy pops up, and Ella says, oh, well, he looks interesting, and all of a sudden I started getting messages from him, and I thought, well, he sounds pretty good, but I don't know about it. Well, it turns out that he was a former political campaign manager, and he was very successful, and he's used to winning campaigns, and I became his campaign, and he won. and he's great. And the first day I met him, I said, now, let's just get something clear. There is no way I'm ever going to marry you. And he said, that's just fine. Let's just be unfettered and free together. And I thought, oh, well, I like that line. Yeah. I like that. That's a good line.
Yeah.
And you know what? He's held to it. I've been married. I got married, and here it is, 9 years later, happy as can be that I married him.
Oh, fantastic.
We didn't go to the States. We went to Mexico because I wasn't quite ready to go back to the States.
Okay.
We had just had an election, and I wasn't quite ready to do that. And so we lived down in Mexico on the beach for a couple of years. And then because of health issues, we did move back to the States. And we found a wonderful place to live. So it's
fair
good.
enough. So, Lori, I'm very concerned of time. It's been an absolute joy talking to you. But before I let you go, how can people find you, find more about you, and also get a hold of your book, which is called Magic of Yes, and it is a beautiful read, I have to say.
Oh, thank you. It is pretty, isn't it? It's such a beautiful cover.
It is super pretty.
Okay, so people can find me, LoriPappas.com. Has links to everything. It has links to my book, links to my newsletter, Sticky Thoughts, which gives glimpses into the paths of other extraordinary women. Mm-hmm. And it also is a portal to my Wise Woman Sisterhood Facebook group that I would love to have you join.
Fantastic. That is beautiful.
So really everything kind of comes from LoriPappas.com. And I'm sure you'll have that link on your notes. Yeah, that will be posted. Now, there was one thing that you'd said at the end of the podcast that you wanted to Absolutely.
And
And that is, I would really like to ask the listeners that if you received one little thing out of this conversation that might help you, that you feel is a little gem, would you please include that in your review of Lindsay's podcast, the Midlife Freedom? That's
yes,
wonderful. That's a wonderful name, Midlife Freedom.
thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. I think
So
that's a lovely suggestion.
yeah, so just include that in there, and Lindsay will make sure that I receive that because I really want feedback. I want to deliver a message that will generate at least one little thing that you want to take home with you
Yeah.
that might help. And so leave her a review on Midlife Freedom
Thank
and
you.
include that little thing.
I have to say the one thing that I've taken from your book,
Uh-huh.
is the
Uh-huh.
dream.
Yeah?
Your
You like
dream
that dream
series.
sequence.
I absolutely
And,
loved it, and it's inspiring.
and the thing that I'm finding with it is that when I'm writing like a newsletter or writing something, if I think about that dream framework, it really helps me stay on point and cover those bases of what really needs to happen in order to reach that goal. So it's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Well done. Now, I hear you're being called by the dogs in the background. So thank you so much for today, Lori. I'm so grateful that we could get together to do this.
Oh, I am too. Thank you, Lindsay, and I'm so glad you're my friend.
Oh, thanks, love.
Okay.
Hi, what did you think of the show today? Thanks for being here. I hope you loved it. If you want to follow up on anything you heard in the show, there will be links and stuff in the show notes below. So please go ahead and click on those. Now, also, I'd love to invite you, if midlife transformation is something that you're interested in or has been a little itch that you need to scratch, please check out Unbound Coaching, which is just releasing this spring. And it's a beautiful coaching container to support you whilst you're going through your midlife transformation. And certainly if you want to do a midlife reinvention. And also please check out that in the show notes. I'd love to have you on board and to help you through your transformation. Okay, see you soon. Bye.